Hello everybody here in Ontario. I am Paul McKeever. I'm a lawyer. I'm also the leader of the Freedom Party of Ontario. For the last almost a month now, I've been graphing the various bits of data that have been released by the Ontario government day after day. And one of those graphs has just been rendered impossible. The data for April 14th graphed or included data concerning the number of persons tested positive, the number of persons whose results were still, in the lab waiting for those results to become available, and that allowed you to determine the number of people whose results were negative. And so that has allowed me day after day to graph the number of persons negative, the number of persons positive. In other words, the number of persons whose tests came back positive being the number of people who have the virus. Whether or not they also have the disease is a separate question. COVID-19 is the disease. The virus is the coronavirus too. And these tests are for the virus, not for COVID-19. That's another conflation that the Ontario government's involved in. But in any event, as of today, they are no longer telling us how many people have been tested. They're changing the denominator. So we can no longer know what percentage of people were tested and found not to have the virus, nor can we tell how many people were tested and found to have the virus as a percentage of those tested. They've switched from reporting the number of persons tested to the number of tests administered. So if a person has had the test administered 2, 3, 4 times, as is sometimes the case, that will up the number in the denominator. So we no longer will have a clear idea of the percentage that came back positive and the percentage that came back negative. I don't know if this is intentional, whether they don't want us to know that information, or whether it's just a stupid and unnecessary oversight because they could just show us the number of tests if they want us to do that, as well as showing us the number of persons tested. But for some reason, they replaced the number of persons tested with the number of tests administered. I'm going to show you the results as they've been coming out up till April 14th, and this will be the main graph that you'll no longer be able to see because the government's making it impossible for us to know. The government replaces the page every day, so you cannot get any sense of what the data was like yesterday unless you do what I was doing, and that is to maintain an ongoing graphing of the data. But I've used the Wayback Machine here, the Internet Archive, and you'll see this is the results for the 14th. These are the results for the 14th, and you'll see right here it says total tested, 113,082. And if you look at the footnote 4 and you come down to the footnotes, you'll see this includes all persons with tests performed by the Public Health Ontario Laboratory and non-public health laboratories. This is an underestimate of the total number of tests completed, as a minimum of 2 specimens are recommended when testing hospitalized individuals for COVID-19. Hospitalized individuals, not everyone, but the ones in the hospital, minimum of 2. Okay, so that's number of persons tested, okay? If you go then to today's result, so the result posted on the 16th of April, and it concerns the data from the 15th of April, you'll see that it says total tests completed. And if you look at the footnote, it says total number of tests completed by COVID-19 clinical lab network, including blah, blah, blah. The numbers reflect volumes processed during the 24-hour period, blah, blah, blah. The number represents total tests and not persons tested. Well, what's the result of that? Well, here's the graph that I've been producing every day. The red is the number of persons, not number of tests, but the number of persons who were tested and their test came back negative. Most people come back negative. These are the data for the people who were tested for the virus and the virus test came back positive. Now they're making it impossible to make this graph so that you can see what's going on over the days, because they're not telling us anymore how many people have been tested. They're only going to tell us how many tests. So there you have it. If you're at all upset about this, as I am, please, especially if you're a reporter, bring it up with the Premier and or his representatives and ask them please to put the data back on about the number of persons tested. It is completely relevant and very important data for the public to get some sense of what percentage of us are coming back with a positive test, what percentage of us are coming back with a negative test. And mind you, these are tests only of people who've met the criteria to be tested in the first place, because they're ill or what have you, when they're showing up to a hospital, or maybe they're hospital workers. But even among that population, we need to have some sense of the number of like the percentage of persons who are having positively tested results or tests that come back positive for the coronavirus, and the percentage that come back negative for the coronavirus. Otherwise, we're left in the dark. We can let our fantasies run wild. We can underestimate, we can overestimate, but we don't know, and there's no reason for the government not to tell us. So write to your MPP, but write to the Premier. And if you're one of the people on the front lines of the journalism profession, make sure you ask them to put that data back on there, because frankly, I think it's a cover-up.